Hello, everybody, and welcome to your live event. My name is Eric Wynkoop. I'm the Director of Culinary Instruction, and I'm also one of your instructors in the courses. In particular, I want to welcome you to my office hours today. This is your chance to ask questions about food and cooking, and I'll do my best to respond to those. As we get started, I want to mention a couple of the usual housekeeping tips regarding participation. And the first one is on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see some questions that are already populated. And if you'd like to participate more directly, feel free to enter a question or even a comment in the add question here dialog box, and that'll make its way to the queue. And then the second comment is, as you look at the already posted questions, in the individual question box is a heart-shaped icon. And if you would like a particular question answered sooner than later, go ahead and click on that icon and it'll push it up in priority. Okay. And, as we get started today, before I jump into the questions, I want to talk about a topic that's come up a few times over the last 2 or 3 weeks, let's say. And it has to do with confidence in the kitchen and recipe substitutions. And that's a kind of a broad topic, but I want to share a few thoughts. And I was reminded of this today as I was in the corner of the room here of my office here, looking at my books, and I came across a particular book by a fellow named Harold McGee. It's called The Curious Cook. Harold McGee is a food science and cooking guy, and it's really the title of this book that got me going. And I want to encourage all of you to be curious cooks as you move through your Rouxbe course and gain more understanding, right, of cooking methods and the ancillary techniques that support your cooking. And as your knowledge base broadens and your confidence deepens. Okay. And this brings me to substitutions in recipes. And, I'll begin by saying that at Rouxbe, we curate a lot of recipes. If you look through our gallery, you'll find recipes of all different sorts. And, with confidence, I can say that by far the majority of those recipes have been produced in-house and tested in-house and photographed and all of that. And they work. There's a small percentage that we've brought in from partners that we have not necessarily tested. So, in other words, by far the majority of those recipes that we've done, again, they worked well at the time of testing. But I want you to understand that when a recipe is properly tested, or maybe I should just say tested, and then written accordingly, that outcome, that successful outcome, is specifically based on those circumstances associated with the place and the person doing the recipe testing. Okay, and as we take a look at any variables that might be a part of that scenario, whether it is the equipment that's used or the specific variety of an ingredient that's used, or even the humidity in the air, all of these things can affect the outcome that one might produce in their home kitchen. And a big part of this also is going to be the knowledge and skill and experience that comes along with that particular cook. And, I see, I'll say from time to time, but with some regularity, the novice cook who will make a recipe and then realize that the results really aren't up to par, or they don't look like maybe the photographs that were displayed, and they'll complain about the recipe. and dismiss it and try to move on to finding an alternative. And my suggestion is be patient. Be patient with yourself. As you gain more experience and understanding of how things work in the kitchen, not just ingredients, but how cooking methods and, again, these other techniques are applied, and the nuances that are associated with all of these variables. Okay, so that you can start to tailor a recipe to fit your particular situation. And it's not uncommon for a recipe to be written in a way that can be successful or pretty successful most of the time, for most people. But it's also not so uncommon that the results are a little bit off target, or maybe not quite suiting your own palate, which means you need to take ownership and practice that recipe maybe a couple, three more times until you understand it better, and start to make some changes, some tweaks to the recipe to make it fit your situation. My suggestion is to make a recipe as written the first time so you can understand the author and understand the process, and then go from there in terms of tailoring it to fit your situation. Okay. And so all the while, when you get into this testing phase of your own, exercise your curiosity, be the curious cook. Try to increase the heat, or increase the cooking time, deepen the browning, swap out one kind of cinnamon with another, try, one type of a root vegetable in place of another, and see how you like the results. In the end, whether I like the results of the recipe really don't count, right? It's going to be up to you and what you make for your family and your friends. Okay. And so this is, your chance to make it your own. All right. So with that thought out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into the questions of the day. All right. And so the first one in the queue is from Linda, who says, in the previous session, so in the previous live event, Chef Shar on our instructional team mentioned dryer sheets as part of a method for cleaning burnt stainless steel pans. I have no idea what these are. Maybe a USA thing. I'm in the UK. I am still burning pans. Okay. Let's see here. There are a couple of references that are posted here for you to look at, Linda and others. First, around what dryer sheets are, if you're unfamiliar with those, as well as how you might use them to clean pots and pans. And, basically, if you get a fresh dryer sheet and put it into your pot, and put a little bit of water in it and let it soak overnight, it's supposed to loosen up the stuff that's stuck on or kind of burnt on. And a technique that I have not used, but I hope you'll give it a try. All right. And so you'll see some links posted. Thank you. And the next one down is from Elena, who says, what's the best substitute for cashews in vegan recipes? Many thanks. So this is a nice continuation of the topic I started out with, the topic of ingredient substitutions and recipe changes. So when we consider making a change to a recipe for whatever reason, the first thing to consider is the function of the original ingredient. Okay. And, very often ingredients will have multiple functions, not just one, which can make substitutions a little trickier. But, ingredients might provide, thickening or body or structure in some way. They might provide a particular mouthfeel. They could provide color, flavor, taste, or aroma to the finished product, or other characteristics to the food. And so we want to think about the function that ingredient plays. And then we want to think about what ingredients can fulfill, right, that requirement or those characteristics. And again, sometimes it's going to be more than one ingredient that plays the role of that original single ingredient. In the case of cashews in vegan recipes, it depends on the function. Okay, but I'll just start by saying that the reason why cashews are often used for, say, um, cream, plant-based cream preparations, just as an example, is because cashews have a relatively neutral flavor. Excuse me. And nice fattiness. And so you start to mimic, excuse me, some of the characteristics, of the original cream or sour cream or whatever it is that the nuts might be replacing. So I would also ask, why do you want to replace the cashews? That's an important bit to understand when we talk about substitutions. Is it just the flavor, or is it something health related, religion related, or something else? But without any of that context, think about other nuts and seeds that might do the job. Okay, so sunflower seeds, whether in their whole form or pureed, can mimic some of the qualities of cashews, depending on how you handle the cashews, as well as any other nuts. Okay, whether it's a macadamia nut or a walnut or something else. Do keep in mind that as you switch ingredients, in this case, using other nuts and seeds, that there's a flavor that accompanies the texture of that new ingredient. And so whatever you're making is going to shift in flavor as well. And so ask yourself, is that going to be okay? Is that a result that I can live with? Okay. Now, the other bigger picture point to understand when we make any change to a recipe, whether it's an ingredient change or a cooking method or technique change, is that you should expect a different result, right? Because you're changing the recipe in some fashion, and it's just not going to be the same as the original. Okay, so that's reasonable to expect. Okay, but otherwise, be the curious cook and give a try. With some of these other ingredients that might be okay for you. Regarding whatever reason has prompted the substitution. Thank you. All right, in June, hello. June says, I'm gluten intolerant. What can I substitute for whole wheat flour or whole wheat pastry flour? Or would I be better off instead searching for a recipe that's been tested as gluten-free? When it comes to making gluten-free, flour substitutions, my recommendation is to go to the store and buy an already formulated product from a company like Bob's Red Mill. There are others, and give it a try. These companies, especially the larger companies, will often have more than one formula to choose from. One that might be better for pizza dough, one that might be better for cookies or something else. And so try to find something that fits, the product that you intend to make. But that's going to be the best place to start because they've already done the testing. They've done the tinkering in their kitchen and come up with something that apparently works well enough that they're selling it, right, on some regional, national, or international basis. And it's probably fair that you give that a try and see how you like it. Again, you don't have to like it, right? It's all up to you, but you're not going to know until you give it a try. Otherwise, designing your own gluten-free flour blend can take some time. It can take some experimentation, call it trial and error. Because there are going to be multiple ingredients that come together to replace that single wheat flour that you're trying to get rid of. And you might have brown rice flour, you might have tapioca starch, you might have guar gum, among other things that finally get you to the point, that you got textures and a crumb, and these other aspects of the baked good that satisfies your requirement, or comes close to the original. Okay, keep in mind that depending on what you're making, the results can be very close, to the original with the wheat flour, and other times it's much more challenging to replicate the function of the gluten and how that package works with the original wheat flour. Okay, so for example, something like cookies, pretty forgiving. You can make changes in ingredients left and right with cookies, and come up with something that still tastes good. That something that might look similar to the original, even if it's a little different. But something like a baguette, or loaf bread, can be a little more challenging. So be prepared to shift your expectations a little bit, or approach this with an open mind. Okay, if something like gluten-free products are a requirement for you. Okay, thank you. All right, and next question from Blanca. How can I know when to replace or purchase a new Dutch oven? I've had mine for about 10 years. It is my first Dutch oven, so it's gone through a lot of trials and errors. Okay, I read that as experimentation and cooking fun. All right, so I'd say most people are going to replace enameled cast iron cookware. Um, when the enameling starts to crack and come off, that's probably the sign that I look for. Now, with that in mind, there's no reason why a Dutch oven or any other again enameled cast iron needs to be replaced necessarily at any time interval. They can last a very long time. Just depending on what that surface looks like. And when I think about the surface, I'm thinking about the interior that makes contact with my food and what might get into the food in terms of chips coming off, into the food. If you're dealing with unenameled cast iron, I don't think there's any reason to replace it. It should last a lifetime, and you keep it seasoned, and you should be fine. Okay, I hope that's helpful. Thank you. All right, and Ingrid is asking, is the head of the octopus eaten? It certainly can be eaten. It's otherwise it's totally up to you. But like any other sort of critter that we might eat, the head also serves as the body. So you want to clean it out of its guts or its innards. And don't forget to remove the beak. And this would be true of squid as well. And then you can eat, the meat that's left over. Thanks. All right. And let's see. We've got another question from Ingrid, who says, I know this is a simple question. When do we put a lid on a pot? I see sometimes cooks let them be open without a lid, or a tight fitting closed lid. So yeah, I would say, first of all, follow the directions of whatever it is you're making. Okay, I mean, hopefully, if the author is specifying some sort of a direction that it's been tested, and that there's a reason for that recommendation. So follow that, understand the recipe, and then go from there. But I mean, otherwise, generally speaking, there's a lot of flexibility, okay, on the use of a lid. But one overarching reason is simply to maintain heat, and so some of this can depend on whether it's a dry heat cooking method or a moist heat cooking method that you might be applying here. But generally speaking, If you put a lid on something, right, it's going to maintain the heat in the pot. And so it's going to push heat into the food and facilitate the cooking of that product. Now, it's also going to trap moisture. And so if you start out with some saute work, maybe developing color, the browning on the surface of the food, as you put the lid on the pot, maybe to finish cooking, understand that now you're engaging a moist heat method, whether it's probably steaming, but it depends on the details here. Okay. And so textures can change, the appearance can change with that. You get to decide whether that's desirable or not, okay, based upon the finished product that you are shooting for. Okay. When it comes to bringing water up to a boil, it's probably nice to put a lid on because it'll shorten that time as the heat is maintained in the pot rather than escaping into the atmosphere. Okay. In our lessons, one thing we talk about when cooking green vegetables in submersion methods or via submersion methods like simmering is to take the lid off in order to let some of these natural acids evaporate or otherwise escape, and rather than being trapped in that environment and hastening color change in relation to the pigment chlorophyll. Okay. And there's certainly some truth to that, but I will also add that when cooking green vegetables, in most cases anyway, the bigger issue is just one of controlling time, because even if you take the lid off of a pot when you're simmering something like broccoli, if you simmer it for a long time, you'll get that dingy olive drab sort of shift in its color. Okay. And so it's not simply, am I using a lid or not, but you got to pay attention to what's going on in the pot as well. Okay. And one thing that I frequently mention to my students is don't forget the very, very fundamentals of cooking. And by and large, that is the control of time and temperature, those two factors. And so, regardless of what it is that we're doing, right, we often have one or both of those that are at play. And so, in the case of simmering green vegetables, you're going to bring that pot up to a simmer, which in my book, in my mind, is a temperature range of approximately 185 to 205 degrees Fahrenheit. So a little bit under a boil and greater than a poach. Okay. So it's gentle, but you have some bubbles that are coming up to the surface to give you a gentle environment for the food to maintain its integrity and not bounce around and get damaged inside the pot. So now you just control if you can control that time, or excuse me, the temperature, the simmer range, then you get to adjust the time. Okay. And that same broccoli will be bright green in about 15 seconds. It'll be bright green and taking on some tenderness, after about a minute. And then if you leave it in there for 5, 6, 7 minutes, that brightness fades off and you start to move toward olive drab, which we associate with overcooked green vegetables. And so you get to play, okay, in these spaces with the lid, without the lid, and engage yourself with what's going on. Listen to your food, look at the food, smell it, pull out samples and taste it. Get your fingers in there and touch it. Use all of your senses to understand what's going on. Okay. Thank you. Great question. All right. And look at this. Another question from Ingrid, who writes, having a dish that uses dice of potatoes or beets for a salad. Okay. Is it better to cut them blanched In other words, blanch them first or cook them first and then cut them, or better to dice them first and then cook them, or does it make any difference? Okay. Um, so, one big difference is the cooking time that's going to be involved. All right. So clearly, if something is smaller in size versus something bigger, it's going to cook faster. All right. So think about that. Um, Also, when it comes to something like potatoes, this is a great example. When we're cooking whole potatoes, or especially large pieces of potatoes, and yeah, I'll talk more about this. Yes, the general rule is to start out in cold water. Okay, and slowly increase the temperature. Okay, so as we slowly increase the temperature of the water, the heat penetration begins, and it has a chance to slowly penetrate that kind of dense food item. Okay, and the idea is that we cook that potato or the pieces of potatoes evenly, all right, from exterior to interior, without overcooking the outside and undercooking, the inside, because something like a potato is fairly delicate, and if we have the heat coming on very quickly, the outside portion, right, is going to cook is going to cook first as heat continues to move to the center. It's going to overcook in that scenario before the center is evenly cooked. And that's when we start to see skin peeling off and chunks breaking off in the water. That's going to be a sign that the water was too hot and was heated too quickly. Another issue that comes up when cooking root vegetables, looking at this example here, whether they're diced or whole, okay, is if the water is boiling and is too much agitation, as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, the things in the pot start to bang into each other. And this is when you get the edges that start to round off, the sharp, beautiful corners that you cut with those developing knife skills get rounded, or they start to break off. And this is why it's very desirable, and I would say important, to learn to maintain a simmer, which is a relatively gentle cooking method. It's hot enough to get the cooking done, to transform starches and proteins in the food, but it's gentle enough that the food isn't just roiling around and banging into each other and getting damaged right inside that more aggressive environment. Okay, and so really, if you're cooking potatoes, you could dice them first, or you could cook them whole. I've done it both ways, and it can be successful both ways. I suggest that you put on your curious cook hat and give it a try. Run some tests of your own, maybe a whole potato, maybe half potatoes, and then maybe some large dice of potato. And again, start to develop the nuances, right, of your touch, of controlling time and temperature, maintaining a simmer, and then see how you like the results. Now, another thing to keep in mind is as we pull potatoes out of simmering water, if we're going to use them in a relatively dry application like a potato salad, it's desirable to let them air dry for a little bit. So once we pull them out of the water, right, they're strained, lay them out as single file as you can on a sheet pan or two, and just let them air dry. Let that excess moisture dissipate, and that's going to tighten up the potato in terms of its structure. It's going to have a nice, a firmer feel to it, and it's going to have more potato flavor. It won't taste as watery. Okay. One thing we don't want to do is let the potatoes cool in the water and we don't want to shock them under cold water as we do with many other vegetables like carrots or broccoli. Okay, because the potatoes will soak up the water and they will actually taste watery. Okay, and so I hope you'll give that a try, Ingrid, and you'll discover what works best for you. And you might even find a couple of different ways forward that can fit some different scenarios. Okay, thank you. All right, and let's see. Next up, we got a question from Mary who says, "Is it possible to roast frozen vegetables? If so, do you have any tips?" Oh, sure. Why not? We can roast frozen vegetables, just keeping in mind that they're going to be soft already because during the freeze thaw cycle, right, the water expands, cell membranes rupture, and then when the product thaws, you have this slackness that is going to be part and parcel of that product. And this is going to be particularly true of vegetables, right? These plant items. Okay. So they're going to appear like they've been blanched, they're going to be soft. They're going to look a little bit, wet to the eye. They're probably going to have some water that's exuding from them. When roasting, use a high temperature. And, you might even combine the roasting, function of the oven with the broiler, some intense heat. Or if you're using a grill, right, the intense heat from the bottom. And you can then impart some color, which means flavor, and probably a more enjoyable product to eat. But again, give that a try and see how you like it. Thank you. Okay, and next question, Elena, thank you. What's the best substitute for butter in baking cookies or cakes? So here again, it's going to depend specifically on the function of the ingredient and just how the butter is treated, in those recipes or those formulas. But when it comes to cookies, as I mentioned earlier, they tend to be pretty forgiving. For cakes, it depends on what mixing method, what kind of cake you're making. But the first thing to do really is to go down to the grocery store and choose a store that is like a Whole Foods or a Wild Oats or a New Seasons that will have maybe a larger selection of plant-based options for things like butter. And you might even ask an employee in that dairy section for the latest information, the latest products. Okay. In some cases, so in other words, something off the shelf is probably going to give you a good solution. Okay. In some cases, coconut oil can be a good substitution, again, depending on what you're making and how you like that flavor. All right. I, in the past, have used a product called Flora, and it was a plant-based butter substitute out of New York City. And more recently, I've come across a product at a food show, and oh boy, I'm trying to think of the name now. It's something like starts with the letters VIO, VO Life, or something like that. So you might give that a try. Those are a couple of products that are formulated to mimic butter, to come pretty close to butter. Okay, in terms of flavor, look, and performance. Now, I might steer you clear of things like spreads, like these butter flavored spreads, like gee, I can't believe it's butter. If that's a real thing, I'm not even sure. But those things tend to have a lot more air whipped in them, and they'll perform different a lot of times from just plain old butter. Okay, so keep that in mind as you think about what you might choose. Okay, thank you. All right, and next up from Peggy, I have two holiday brunches coming up. We've been asked to bring a dish to pass. What are a couple of suggestions to cook at home that travel well and heat up quickly before serving? Thank you. Let's see. So I don't see any food prescriptions listed here. So maybe it gives me uh, the ability to just suggest anything like deviled eggs, and no heating required, right? Something like dolmas or dolmades, these grape leaves that are stuffed with rice and sometimes with minced meat like minced lamb, but also spices and nuts and sometimes dried fruits. These that's another example of something that doesn't have to be heated up. They travel very nicely. Now you might try something like some phyllo triangles. In the spirit of like a spanakopita or maybe even a samosa that has some filling. That could be potato based. It could be spinach based. And these things can be baked off ahead of time. They travel nicely and they heat up very easily as well. Okay, and so those are a couple three examples that I hope you might try out. Thank you. Hello, Janet. Good day. I just got some hex-clad cookware. Do you have any experience with them? Thank you. No, I don't. I'm sorry to report. I do see the hex-clad salesperson regularly at Costco, and I've even looked at them up close, but I just haven't had a chance to cook on them, so I don't have anything to report. Let us know your experience. Thank you. All right. And next up from Cynthia. Thank you. Thank you for being here today. I do appreciate it. I just bought a paring knife on sale. So Zwilling Hinkle's brand, but without a guard. Well, keeping it in a wooden knife block that holds knives at an angle dull the blade. I may return it. I don't think that should be a problem. A wooden knife block is a pretty common way to store knives. One of several ways, but a pretty common way. What you might consider is, when you slide the knife in, to put the cutting edge up, okay, and so that what would be the top side is down, and then you don't have to worry about the cutting edge making contact. But I don't see any problem with that particular storage method. I think even more importantly is going to be otherwise your maintenance of the knives. And we talk about chef's knives a lot, but even with paring knives, it's a good idea to put them on your honing steel or your honing rod, before each use. Maybe it's once a day, for example, and maintain that blade in its tip-top cutting fashion. Okay, and then sharpen it also periodically. Very often these smaller knives or secondary knives get pushed to the side with a lot less attention than the chef's knife or whatever your larger main knife is that you use. But paring knives can be very important in the kitchen, and they're great utility knives. In their all-purposeness, and so do take the time to hone them regularly and to sharpen them as needed. Thank you. All right, Sabrina is asking, is there a vegan butter that doesn't have palm oil, coconut oil, or margarine? These plant-based oils raise cholesterol. Sabrina, you'll need to read the ingredient list. There are many, many products out there, and and I've certainly read a bunch of them, but I don't remember all of those things that I've come across. So I would suggest that you head on down to your favorite grocer or two and just check it out. Talk to, again, an employee that might be a specialist in the products of that department, and go from there. Okay, thank you. All right, and so Sabrina has another question. For drawers, I use washcloths, or wrap my knives in washcloths and store them in a drawer. That sounds perfect. Yeah, that sounds like a great way to protect knives from banging into each other or with other things, and effective as well. Thank you for sharing. All right, another question from Cynthia, who says, I have not tried making my own cashew or almond milk yet. I've seen many online methods. Can you give me your methods of making them? Yes. So, let me first give a plug to a live event that I did some time ago on the topic of plant-based milks. And, for that particular segment, I think I don't know, I made and tested dozens of products. And basically you're putting whatever your ingredient is, almonds or something else, into a blender with water, fundamentally, right? And blending it. And if you got a high-speed blender that can really extract or I guess bring down that product to a smooth consistency, and so you can get the benefit of whatever's in that food item. And then you can adjust the liquid, right, for different consistencies. You can strain it if you want to. That's optional. If you do strain it, you're going to come up with a whole bunch of solids. I hope you find a way to use that, okay, whether it's incorporating it into a soup or a stew or bread or a smoothie or something else, okay, because there's a lot of goodness that would otherwise, go to waste if we didn't recover that. Okay, but it really is that simple. Okay, Cynthia. So as you get started, what's today's goal? To be the curious cook, and just give it a try. And again, you're either adjusting the quantity of the nuts or you're adjusting the quantity of the liquid in order to come up with a consistency that you like. And you can then add spices if you want, or herbs, or you kind of take it from there. Okay. Keep in mind that generally speaking, house-made plant-based milks will have a shorter shelf life than most anything, the equivalent milk that you buy from the grocery store, because it's going to be cleaner. And so feel good about, consuming real food, clean food, better for you food, or less harmful for you food, depending on how you want to think about it. But also go to the store and read the label of the equivalent plant-based milk that you're thinking about making at home, or that you do make at home. You might be surprised at what you find on the ingredient list. All right, have fun with it. Thank you. All right, and look at that. Patrick, thank you for posting a link to that live event from some time ago. All right, and so Janet asks, do honing steels wear out? Yes, they do. And she goes on to write, mine is many years old and seems too smooth. Any recommendations for a brand that you're especially pleased with? Let's see here. I can't think of brands offhand. I'm sure that I've got a couple of German branded products that I've had for a long time. Whether it's Wüsthof or Henkel's or something else. I've also used these honing rods that they have they're said to have a diamond dust adhering to them. Some of them are also ceramic, And some of them have a round cross section, and others have kind of uh, an almond shaped cross section. And either one can work fine. Um, but yeah, I mean, if yours is getting smooth and it's not doing the job, okay, then yeah, feel free to replace that. Or if you can maybe just borrow somebody's for about 2 minutes or even 10 seconds, really, and just try your knife on someone else's newer one or different one to see how it compares with yours, you will have the answer as to whether yours is worn out or not. Okay, thank you. Okay, so Cynthia says, following up on your answer to dicing potatoes, etc., what do you say about steaming the potato? I've been steaming a whole sweet potato on low heat for myself to save time while I'm doing other things. That sounds perfect. Yeah, yeah. I think if you've got a solution that works for you, two thumbs up, right? I mean, that's a great answer that fits your situation, and uh, you know, I usually am dropping sweet potatoes into the oven at 350 for, if they're this big or so, hour and 15 minutes, hour and a half or so while I'm doing other things. And, once they start to ooze some of that sugary syrup, then that's how I like them. I know they're done. Just as a comparison, okay. But yeah, I mean, your method of steaming sounds perfect. Thank you. All right, and Cynthia says, thank you for your intro discussing substitutions. Great tips and encouragement, advice. Taking ownership was a great idea, very helpful advice. Sunflower, yeah, okay, sunflower seeds. Or no, maybe that's an emoji. I'm not sure. But thank you, Cynthia, for your participation today. I do appreciate it. It adds to the show, right? And so I encourage all of you, to send in questions and comments as it relates to your situation. And then next up from Sabrina, I have a non-stick pan that I use to make pancakes. When done with cooking, I will wipe out with a soft cloth. It is sticky a bit. Is it the heat? Do I need to clean it with something? The stickiness in my experience is going to come from the oil that might be used or any fats that might come out of ingredients. It also has to do with any sugars or starches that might convert to sugar or whatever is going on chemically, as we're cooking foods. That just leave, proteins are part of that as well, but those things leave a little film on our cookware. And wiping it with a dry cloth is effective, certainly for a while before that film builds up a little bit and we might notice it. And it might be rough to our touch, or other foods might start to stick to the pan. In which case, just a little gentle rubbing, with a soft sponge, maybe with a little bit of a cleaning solution to break through the fats and sugars and proteins to loosen up those things on the surface, would be in order. Okay, that's just part of the periodic maintenance. That's what I find to be successful. Okay, now the other thing I want to mention with nonstick pans is that I'm not speaking for Hexclad because I haven't used them yet, but most any other pan out there, and certainly the ones that I've used that have some sort of a lining in them, okay, over time, they will accumulate scratches. I call them micro scratches. Over time, that pan starts sticking, and it'll need to be replaced. And so, with that in mind, I think about nonstick pans as being disposable items in my kitchen. And with that in mind, I steer folks away from buying full sets of nonstick cookware. Instead, just buy one or two pieces, and then have the rest of them as something else. Stainless steel or cast iron, for example, that will last a lifetime. And then, you can replace that one or two nonstick pans as they get scratches and start to stick as needed. Okay, something to think about. Thank you. Okay, Dr. KK says, do you have any favorite delicacies to suggest for my annual tea party for my 3 granddaughters? Thank you. Wow, this is a wide open question, which can be the most difficult kind of question, but let me share maybe some sort of images that come to mind for a tea party. Let's see here. I think about tea sandwiches that are made with fruit, like sliced strawberries or mango or kiwi, something that's fairly delicate. Um, and you can make these delicate sandwiches with a whipped cream. And if you're plant-based, find something that you like that's plant-based. If you're not 100% plant-based, then you might consider heavy cream, a chantilly, and you make these delicate sandwiches, in that fashion. Let's see, the quick breads, of course, always have a place in tea parties. And I guess depending on your the food preferences, of your 3 granddaughters and their audience, right, their friends and family, you can spice up a quick bread. Take whatever your starting point is, zucchini or banana or something else, and then add some cloves, some ground cardamom, a little more cinnamon or whatever it happens to be, and just bring a little more personality, more aroma, with that food item. And those flavors go really nicely with these hot beverages. If it's tea of any sort, really. And I'm looking at a cup of Earl Grey right now, and so those sort of things come to mind for me. Excuse me. Savory items, I think, are desirable as well to balance the very common sweet items that we see, at tea parties. And, I had mentioned a few minutes ago, the idea of little triangles, right, that are made from phyllo that's stuffed with some sort of a filling, your choice, cheese or vegetables. Potatoes are common in the spirit of an Indian samosa, or spinach in the spirit of something from the Mediterranean. And you can, again, flavor those and add textures through nuts and dried fruits to take these in many different directions. Okay. And you can have some fun with those. They're finger food. You can alter the size as well, depending on the size of your diners and what's comfortable for them. That's one of the things I like about these little phyllo delicacies, is their flexibility internally as well as the size. Okay. But those are a couple of broad areas that come to mind. As far as the phyllo goes, you can also roll them up. Same fillings, and then so you have a different sort of presentation. So maybe you do 2 varieties, right? Some triangles that have one filling and some rolls that have a different filling. Just like we might see among the varieties of baklava in the world, right? Some are rolled up, some are in the form of a cup with those nuts as a filling, drizzle of honey. Sometimes they're in triangles, sometimes they're in squares or rectangles, sometimes they're in diamonds. So there's different ways, to make these things using something like phyllo. And then in a similar manner, you could use puff pastry. And you can create these little containers called a vol au vent. And you can then put fillings. A savory filling is pretty typical in the classic kitchen. And these can vary in size from small to like main course size. And so you can have some fun with those things as well. They look beautiful. They're very light, of course, and buttery and all that goodness. All right. So hopefully there's an idea or two in there that works for you. Thank you. And last up from Lily, um, who says, what is the best way to cook purple cabbage? Well, I'll give my quick intro to the questions that use the word best by first saying that there are multiple ways to do most anything in the kitchen. Some of them, are arguably better than others, but a lot of this is also contextual. It's also cultural, which is very important to cooks. And so, when it comes to purple cabbage, you can simmer it, right? Use a submersion cooking method. You can steam it, that works as well. Those are probably the most common ways to do that. And, it depends on what it is you're making. You can also chiffonade, which means to cut into thin ribbon-like cuts. The chiffonade, and then cook it via a dry heat method, in a saute pan, for example. And so it again is going to depend on your presentation or the way that you will use the product in the end. Okay, so you have multiple choices. So again, be the curious cook and try them all out and see what works in these different situations that you'll encounter in the kitchen. Thank you. And that brings us to the end of today's program. Thank you so much for joining me today for my office hours. I look forward to seeing you again. And in the meantime, happy cooking. Thank you.